Dun, 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 dun. Y'all ready for this? Dun, 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 dun. All right, go ahead. You go.
No, you start.
I was just trying to get you prompts.
That's not going to work.
Punk.
That's gonna do the opposite. I am not
You
a
know what?
cheerleader from 1996.
You know what? What other book club starts with a jock jam? That's all I'm saying. I don't know many, except for this one.
There's a reason for that. Jock jams. Oh my goodness. There is an art of communicating. And this Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, tells us how. And it starts with how you communicate with yourself. Welcome to the Painted Porch Strategies Book Club for the month of June. Maybe you're joining us in whatever month. It doesn't matter because we're communicating effectively right here with you. My name is Rob Hunter, joined by Amy Yakowski. She is the founder, the CEO, our Chief Evolution Officer at Painted Porch Strategies, and Sierra Ram Cantrell, who is our mindfulness guru, our mindfulness Sherpa,
and our Chief Joy Officer.
And the Chief Joy Officer. I'm the MC, the Master of Communication. So communicating with yourself, ladies, what was your takeaway in how Thich Nhat Hanh breaks it down for us?
Well, this is the first part of the book. So starting from the beginning of the book, even if you don't know anything about this author, you can tell there's a slightly different approach to this writing. This writing is very simple. It's not really fluffy. There's he kind of dives right in, and I love how he dives in with this idea that you need good things to survive, essential food. And this doesn't mean just food that you eat, anything that you consume, anything that you watch, that you're a part of. What is going in is going to affect your out.
Yeah, I agree. I loved that analogy of the consumption, and both what are you taking in, but also what are you serving out, right? The words that you're saying, the food that you are serving out into the world. And he poses this really big question right at the beginning. Are we consuming and creating the kind of food that is healthy for us and helps us grow? Or is it maybe things that are contributing to our ill health, our dis-ease, right? As we think about with the Stoics, we talk about the dis-ease.
So he uses the term nourishment for your communication. So Amy just used the food analogy, right? Nourishment. So are you communicating good, positive ideas, or are you gossiping and trying to tear people down? That's what he's talking about here. What do you spend your time communicating with your friends, with your family? What do you spend your time reading on your phone, interacting with on your phone? What types of nourishment are you giving your body? Because he uses the analogy of the cow. And the cow has skin that protects it from flies and all these other things. He says, our skin works the same way, but it's porous. So the energy from the gossip and the negativity, it goes inside of you, and it's working inside your body.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you stop that? Awareness. And that's really what I think that first chapter is about, because the first step in growth, the first step in anything is awareness of what is going on. Don't even call it a problem. It's just what is going on. So do you have a lot of negative thoughts that keep popping up in your head? If you knew that all of the other thoughts in the world are available to you, they don't always have to be negative. Is that a step? Yes, he says. Because the other elements of the first part, which we're doing the first really talking to yourself part, we'll get into talking with others next week here on the porch. But in talking to yourself, that awareness is giving yourself space to understand yourself, understand where you're coming from, what your perspective is, what your beliefs are. So he uses the example of finding non-thinking time, downtime. He says, while you're cleaning the toilet or the bathroom. Now that may work for you, it may not. You have to find your own process, but that's a critical step in all of this, is that self-awareness, that self-understanding. So that's that step where you have to say, okay, what am I nourishing myself with when it comes specifically to communication?
Mm-hmm. Well, just to even take it a step back, I just to nail the nourishment idea home, I love the example he used of French fries, where he says, you know what, French fries are a food, but you don't necessarily want to consume French fries all day, every day.
Kind of do, but I won't.
Well, you might want to,
Mhm.
but it's not going to be good for you over time. And then he says, you know, staying on your phone for hours on end is like eating French fries, or, you know, binge watching a show. Granted, you can do that every once in a while, but he's saying it's like eating French fries. And to go back to what you said, and Sierra, I know that this is like your jam juice right here, but he says, number one, the best way to do that is to practice some mindfulness. And that mindfulness is the opportunity to your point, to create awareness, but also more importantly, to learn how to practice some compassion.
Yeah.
So what were some of your immediate thoughts?
He gives a really important tool right at the beginning of this book. And quite simply, this is just a breath anchor or a breath awareness. And he said, and I love the way he explains it. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. But he reminds us of it because it's so simple. It can be easy to forget. He says, just breathe in and breathe out. And then think, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, right? That's it. This is the magic juice right here. But not just breathing, because your body has a part of the brain where breathing is automated, where you don't have to think about it, right? So now you're telling me now I need to think about something that I don't have to think about. Yes. What this does is this gets you to be present in your body. It gets you to feel when you're breathing in, feel when you're breathing out. And he says, just do that. And when you're trying to be a better listener, just do that. Just do that. Because this allows you to drop into where you are right now. Once you start finding that breath anchor, once you find that breath, breathing in, breathing out, now you can listen. Now you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Well, I love the idea, to put a cherry on top of that, Sierra. He says, find the pleasure in breathing. And I never really thought about it in that context, but when I have my breath that I take, it feels good. Like it feels good to take that oxygen in and let it kind of marinate in your body a little bit, and you breathe it out. So if you notice the joy of that, that automatically shifts your thinking and your state of mind, because you're focused on that one thing, not, you know, a million miles from here is a problem that you've been thinking about for 3 weeks and it's negative. You like, just feel that, because it feels good.
Well, yeah, and I love that. I love the simplicity of it, because you talk about this a lot, Sierra. You know, when people think about meditation or mindfulness or breathing, they're like, oh gosh, okay, I need a special room, I need candles, I need to create space, it needs to be quiet, all these things, and you know, I don't have time for that. And he's like, no, just literally take 3 seconds. Like if we all just right now, just.
And then it feels good. We do it. Feels good.
Like when you consciously take that in and out breath, that's all you need to just reset and to help center yourself on the present, like you were saying, Sierra, and then be able to, okay, now I can listen, or okay, now I can be present. That's all it takes. It's not this, you know, hour-long class of breathing that you have to do. It's literally something you can do before
at any point in any day.
point, you know, before you jump into that next meeting, or before you have to, you know,
it doesn't even have to be before. It can be during.
Oh, absolutely. But the beauty of doing it before is that you're then more primed to listen and maybe, you know, engage in a way that is less frenetic and more calm. And what he talks about, which is the goal of all of this with mindfulness, is to practice more compassion for yourself and love for yourself, which can then permeate out to others.
Where does that compassion come from?
It ties straight into the idea that both Buddhists and Stoics share, is that there is goodness. Everybody wants to do well. Everybody wants to be, you know, do a good job, right? Nobody usually is of ill will with their own perspective. So this is where the Buddhists and the Stoics align together. It's in human nature to do well. Even our last book that we read last month, The Four Agreements, and the Toltec wisdom, they say we all come from the same stuff, the stuff of stars, the same stuff we're all made of. We're all the same stuff, right? It's that oneness. And he talks a little bit about this. There is some definite Buddhist principles that come through. One of the Buddhist principles that not everybody might be aware of is that they don't really believe in when you die, it's not the end. It's just a change in cycle. And I love one of the explanations he gives is it's much easier to understand when you look at a cloud and you can see, if you know basic about liquid, air, ether, solid, is that cloud was not created or destroyed. It changed form. It used to be water that evaporated. Eventually that water in the cloud will turn into rain. It might freeze. So when you think of it like a cloud, that is kind of the Buddhist concept for living things. And that might be in opposition of what some people believe or how they understand. But he says, this is our point of understanding. And if you think of a cloud, it's a way of thinking about it.
It's also an interesting analogy too with our emotions, because it's the same thing. You have all these, again, going back to the nourishment. At some point, you're going to encounter negativity, gossip. It's going to come in. It's going to make you feel a certain way at a certain point. And then you got to figure out how to release that. And obviously following the cloud analogy, sometimes that's tears. Like there is a release of tears. The reason why they happen, your body is releasing it. Just like when you're sick, you have to blow your nose. Your body's getting rid of the sickness, the illness, what's making it, it's adapting. It's like putting it in this mucus and saying, all right, let's get this out of here. Because we have, exports, right? For a reason. Your tear ducts are exports of a reason. It's getting rid of things. So that, especially for men, we're often told, no, you can't cry. I'm like, no, crying is a necessary release process. So if you look at it just like that, not as weakness, actually it's healing, you can change your perception of that. So I want to get back to compassion though, because you said it, Amy, the compassion to yourself is where it all starts. You'll have compassion for others when you have compassion for yourself. So I've been going down I've used the pandemic to do a self-analysis of some real deep things. And it's been fantastic because the more I understand about myself, the more understanding I am of others. But it started by me asking questions about myself. And that's the really focus of the first part of the art of communicating. It's the art of communicating with yourself. And I created a course. My invention is a tool on how to help people, you, be able to communicate with anybody about anything. Because oftentimes we don't because of our own internal feelings. So the first part of Master Your Message, my course, matches this in the sense that it starts with you. So we go through exercises, a process that I call writing a rap, because I love hip hop music, that tries to give you space to process whatever it is you need to process, because it has to start there. Because you become more effective once you start there. And you start by listening to yourself. That's what he's advocating.
Yeah, and that's what I love, the way he framed the idea of mindfulness. Again, mindfulness can seem like this big unknown, or this thing that you're like, no, that's not for me. I'm not into mindfulness. And then really he's just saying all it is simply awareness. And obviously, Sierra, you being our mindfulness Sherpa and the creator of radical mindfulness, this is really your sweet spot here. But I love that he just says that, all of our ability to communicate, to your exact point, Rob, starts with us. And it starts with understanding us, being aware of what is going on within us, because it's only once we're aware of what's going on within us that we can then be able to effectively communicate with others. You talk about, Rob, in Master Your Message, this idea that language is contagious. And going back to the consumption thing, he says in here, you absorb the thoughts, the speech, and the actions of others, and vice versa. What you are what you are spreading is also being absorbed by other people. And that can be full of toxins, or it can be full of love and compassion. And he says that, without mindfulness, we're going to allow those toxins, the things that other people are saying or what we're consuming, to consume us. And then it becomes not good nourishment, it becomes bad. And it's not helping us be strong within ourselves, but also being able to cultivate those strong relationships. He says, every time we speak without mindful awareness, we're feeding this idea of our suffering.
So, Sarah, I want to ask you about this concept of self-mindfulness, because oftentimes the conversation about mindfulness is being mindful of others.
Right.
But what gets left out is that being mindful of how you are and how you react and what things cause your central nervous system to send you an emotional signal, because that is how you relate to the outside world. All of those beliefs and factors and all the things that you've had, your perspective, in other words, you in this moment is how you react to the outside world. So how can self-mindfulness become a part of mindfulness in general, as Mr. Hanh is suggesting in The Art of Communicating?
Well, the self-mindfulness really is being present with exactly what is. So this is the body that I live in, and this is the way that I feel about things. I think part of the self-mindfulness is the being present. And then the other piece of being self-mindful is, like the cow, deciding what it is that you are going to allow under your skin and what you're not. So regardless of what is happening around you, is how can I choose what truly gets into me? And how can I decide what things to just leave, as opposed to, oh, I'm mindful that I feel so triggered by when this happens, or I'm so offended when this happens. You can say, yeah, that doesn't feel right in my body, so I'm going to choose to not put a whole lot of focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
So
go ahead.
It's about yourself. It's about making your own decision. This is who I am. This is what I feel like. And this is what I'm going to allow to affect me, and this is what I'm not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love in your program too, Radical Mindfulness, Sierra, you talk about the idea of a garden and what type of virtues or vices you want to cultivate in that garden. And I loved it because he used a similar scenario here about watering the seeds. What seeds are you watering? Are they seeds that are going to help you grow and thrive? Or are they seeds that are going to be basically a lot of weeds, right? So I love how you talk about that in yours, and make in it kind of along those lines. It's plucking those weeds out and making sure that you're tilling the good soil through what you're aware of.
Well, yeah, and I think that what he's getting at too is that this realization that language is the greatest human invention ever, and it will always be the greatest human invention because it allows collaboration. And what we do here at Paint and Porch Strategies, if you're new to us, we're a stoically based training and advisory company that is really focused on these elements. So Sierra focuses on mindfulness, her expertise. So you can see how this ties into communicating. I focus on communication. I've been a broadcaster for 20 years. I've had every conversation about every political debate with all kinds of different people. And along the way, I've learned how to be able to do that in a non-judgmental way, which gets into this next point, understanding, which gets into what Amy does. Amy's all about teamwork because she knows that every business, every family, every unit has to function effectively. And it starts with mindfulness and communication in order to be an effective teammate. So again, it gets down to you in how you conduct yourself and how you know when you need space or when you're feeling off, maybe you shouldn't communicate because it might upset the flow of the team. But at the same time, you have to know when you have to share an idea or you have to push the team and say, this isn't good enough. That's really what this is all about. And I love that he says it's an art because with art, It's like anything else. Michelangelo and the statue of David, he didn't create that in 5 minutes. He took hours and hours and hours. And it wasn't just while sculpting it, it was the years prior to it that he trained with the tools to be able to create that. That's what this is. So there's no shortcut on the work, but there is many ample distractions that we have, right? Our cell phones. And he wants you to examine, and I highly encourage you to do this as well, why you use your phone and when. So if you need a place to start, if you're overwhelmed, start there. Wonder why you pick up your phone and when, and what is that giving you? And if that's giving you something, are you avoiding something? Are you avoiding thinking about something you don't want to think about? That is a perfect place to start, to practice some self-mindfulness, some self-awareness, which may help you understand yourself, which will then lead you to understanding other people. And when I say by understanding, I think of this, Amy and Sierra, I think of, why do people make the decisions that they do? I'm curious about that rather than the decision. Because more often than not, an opinion does not harm you. So what? Someone has a different opinion than you do. Who cares? It's just a belief. Unless they're making you do something, it's irrelevant. As far as anything more than just words being said. So I've actually come to that conclusion, and I have way more sympathy. A perfect example. We are watching currently American Crime Story, the impeachment, 3rd season of this series. And the way they portray President Bill Clinton is different than I perceived Bill Clinton to be in how he made certain decisions. They focus on the affair with Monica Lewinsky. I'm actually much more understanding of Clinton than I had been prior to watching the show. But that is also because I understand myself, and I can understand how certain feelings, thoughts, beliefs impact your decision-making ability. So he had a pull towards Monica, and I'm like, okay, I'm more sympathetic to that pull. Doesn't mean I like the decision, agree with the decision, but I can understand why he made that decision at least a little bit better. So I don't have to judge him for that decision. Because who cares if I judge him or not?
In the book, he does talk about how understanding our own suffering helps us to understand others. So when you have that self-awareness, and to your point about the phones, is instead of continuing to be distracted and, when do you need to sit with something and understand that suffering, is when you can understand that suffering and where that comes from, not dwelling on it, but just understanding, sitting with it, being present with it, then it helps you to understand other people. It's, yes, I remember when I felt suffering because of XYZ, so I can understand how this person is suffering as a same result. And this is another main cornerstone of Buddhism, is that Buddhism is based on the idea that life is suffering, and to not run from that, but instead to look at that and use that as a way to grow and a way to learn and a way to understand one another.
Yeah, I think it's very telling, because when if you were a layman and someone was explaining Buddhism to you and you're like, Buddhism, the premise of it is that life is suffering, you'd be like, well, that's a big bummer. I don't want to do that. But yet at the same time, you look at some of the happiest people are Buddhists. And the reason why they're the happiest is because, to your exact point, Sierra, they understand suffering. In fact, he even says right here that if we don't understand suffering, we don't understand happiness, because you don't know the difference, or you can't spot the difference between them. So I love how he focused on basically all of this is, all of our struggles that we have with, specifically in this case, communication, but the struggles that we have in being understood, understanding others, and connecting and having strong relationships is our inability or unwillingness to to understand our own suffering, to then be able to show that compassion otherwise. I love, he uses an example here. He even talks about when it comes to fear, like if you're fearful about something, he's like, we don't tell our fear to go away. We recognize it, We don't tell our anger to go away. We're not trying to be like, no, I can't think about that. That bums me out. I don't want to go there. I want to look at my phone and, watch a cat video. He says, no, we actually don't. These feelings are like a small child tugging at our sleeve. Pick them up and hold them tenderly. Basically understand, take the time, take the awareness, take the mindfulness, right? To just sit with it and understand it. So that way you can be more understanding.
I will give you 100% confidence that if you do this work, it will pay off. I've done this work and I'm still doing this work. But what you guys just said, understanding suffering is understanding happiness, is completely true to me, because I grew up suffering, right? With depression, diagnosed twice, went to therapy, 5 different therapists, trying to figure it out. And that at least opened a door for me to explore these things. And it's those lessons I've learned through those sessions, and then some personal development work, and then reading books like this, that I can 100% tell you I have changed from that point in my life to where I'm at now, because I understand my own suffering and where it comes from and why I interpreted things a certain way, and why I'm now grateful for those events, because they shaped who I am, and because I got to be alive to be a part of it, which he gets into in the next section, right?
Mm-hmm.
That if you can shift your thinking, and it might sound hokey and it might sound ridiculous, but all you have to do is one lesson that you really don't like to think about, one mistake you've made, one regret that you've had. If you can find the lesson in it, and you can realize that lesson and focus on the lesson, you may become grateful for that very bad thing that happened to you, because you needed to learn something in that moment. And now that you've shifted that belief, you can now focus on the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So, boom, he's on it. So I want, in terms of wrapping up part 1, communicating with yourself, final thoughts for the day.
I'll end on something that he talks about towards the end, which is kind of reiterating this whole premise of start practicing a little bit in small ways, even if it's, whenever you go to grab your phone, like let that be a moment to just do a breathe in, a breathe out, and a check in with yourself to find that awareness. Because, he says here, I'm going to paraphrase, but basically, they always say, if you can't love yourself, how can you love anybody else? I think that's the overall theme here, but I would even say it's not even so much love. Love is something that you work towards by taking this time and having that awareness and starting to develop that compassion. But it's like, if you can't accept yourself, then you certainly can't accept anybody else. And when you cannot accept anyone else, you're never going to be able to communicate with them in a way that is nourishing to both of you in whatever relationships that you're building.
Good
Yeah,
point.
it's well said. And it does mirror your program, Rob, Master Your Message, where you talk about beginning with yourself. So it's interesting how he says too, is watch that you're communicating in a loving way, in a way that is a kind way, right? And he gets into the next section about like the truth and truth as it's available and how it's understood. But if you can just understand, if you can find that compassion within yourself, compassion based on having acknowledged the suffering, is if you can start there, if you can do it with yourself, then you can start doing it with other people.
Which we're going to get into in part 2. How do you take these lessons and how do you translate them into communicating with everyone else from an acceptance and understanding position, not a judgmental position because someone made different decisions than you? Because that's essentially what life is. It's not about our opinions, it's about our decisions. Mm-hmm. And we judge people based on their opinions, and we judge people based on their decisions. But what if somebody was judging you based on all of your decisions, those decisions that they don't know about that maybe you only know about? And that's what this journey is. And I can tell you from having done the work, I love the work. I feel so much more free that I've done this work. And it really started with the creation of my program, quite honestly, because I really dug into myself. It's Master Your Message here, I just mentioned it. So the point is not to sell you on that, but these are concepts. So if you want to take the concept and put it into practice, we've given you some easy tools to start with. But if you want to dig in more, let us know. Reach out to us, because that's what this whole entire thing at the Porch is designed to do, to get us to be able to discuss ideas openly without fear of judgment, to accept each other, to love each other, to understand that in a Stoic principle, same as Buddhism, we're all here together. At some point, might be 5 years from now, might be 5 million years from now, we're going to have to take all of our collective brain power and work on a massive problem saving the species. Because either we're going to kill the planet or the sun's going to explode. At some point, there is going to be an extinction event that we're going to have to come to terms with. We might have to Armageddon it, go up to an asteroid. But the more brains we have working on it, the better it is. And the more ideas we share, the better it will be. So that's what this is all about. It's about growth for you, but growth for all of us. So if you grow and you understand yourself, you are elevating all of humanity while you do that, because you will be less judgmental. So.
And more compassionate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have a lot of problems in this country and in this world. I mean, there's poverty problems, there's homelessness problems, crime problems. Imagine we actually tried to understand instead of judge.
Right.
What difference we could actually make.
Yeah, right. And recognize that all of us are suffering in some way, shape, or form. Back to the Buddhist principle, we are all suffering. But the more that we can recognize the suffering in ourselves, we can recognize the suffering in others. And through all of this, his core message is our goal when we communicate is to help others suffer less, because then we have that mutually beneficial garden that we're growing that is helping all of us together. Just, you're exactly right. Like, just
this is like the version of eating your broccoli. You don't always want to do it, but you know it's good for you.
Exactly.
So you got to put some seasoning on that puppy and just eat it. Eat the broccoli. Grow and eat the broccoli. It's good for you.
Any other final thoughts here from you, from a mindfulness perspective?
I'm excited to see, as we move in the next section, we're going to start talking about communicating with others and how we can take this compassion and these core concepts. Next week, we get into the Bodhisattva, which is really exciting. I'm curious to see how he teaches this concept, because some of these are tough concepts, but he has a really great way of simplifying things in a way that we can understand them. So I'm excited.
Mm-hmm.
We are too. So we are Painted Porch Strategies. She is Sierra Ram Cantrell. Mindfulness, it's there for you. Radical mindfulness. Go check it out at paintedporchstrategies.com. This right here, the boss lady, the CEO, the Chief Evolution Officer, as we evolve ourselves and we evolve our teams. Her course is on teamwork. Check it out. My name is Rob Hunter. I'm the MC, the Master of Communication. It's exactly what we're doing in this book. So it's available for you. Come say hi, but don't stop here, because this is only week number 1, part number 1. Part number 2, how you communicate mindfully, next week with other people. Cheers.